Hi and welcome to this tutorial of Fractal Architect 3D. Today I would like to talk to you about the variants editor, and let's cut this introduction short and get right into it. Just like with cooking programs on the television, I have prepared one for you. Ta-da! Here it is. And if I want to go to the variants editor now, if I in the Make New window, you have the icon here, and also in the Preview window, you have the icon here. So let's open the Variants Editor. The Variants Editor comes preset to randomize the camera and the color gradient. You can see here that the color gradient changes, and you can see that the perspective and camera settings change too. Let's unselect the camera right now and concentrate on the color gradient. If I click the Set Variant options here, I get a lot of preferences here for setting how much Fractal Architect will randomize every parameter. And the colors, you can see here, randomize the colors from 2 color nodes to 256 color nodes. I think that is most often too many color nodes, so I usually lower this. Let's try 11. And here you can see that the colors that this setting produce are not so many as it was before. There are fewer colors in the fractals. Sometimes that is good, and sometimes you want more colors. We can try to set it as slightly higher here, 36. Yeah, that looks good. There are more things that can be randomized here. Let's look at some of the options. You could also randomize the color shift, or shift the color, I should say. And you can choose to randomize the hue, the saturation, or the brightness, or every one of them. Let's try to just randomize the brightness. You can see that it's the same color gradient, but the brightness of the colors are randomized. You can randomize the background color too. Fractals don't have to be against a black background. There are one specific point with a black background. If you look at this, you can see that the shapes are very transparent here. You can see right through them, and they look like glass or some see-through material. And if you have the black background, they seem to have more mass. That's because the black gives them more shade. And they don't look quite as transparent. Let's try some more settings here. Background. You can choose between a fixed hue, a fixed saturation, or fixed brightness. Let's try and fix the brightness rather dark, like this. You can see that the background color is much darker than it was before. And the shapes here of the fractal give a more solid impression. If we want to have really light backgrounds, you can set a not very much color and rather light, almost white. It gives this result. So that's the background color. The X-form colors, to see what that is, we have to open one of these fractals in the triangle editor. Let's open this one. The X-form colors are these settings here. These settings. It's the color index and it's the color speed. So if we want to randomize the color X-form colors, and let's make them all against a black background first, so you can see the difference clearly. And then try the randomizing the X-form colors. You see that gives different colors too, but it stays within the color gradient that we have selected, or that has been randomized for this fractal. It doesn't change the color gradient and doesn't shift the color gradient. It changes how these different X forms, these different transforms uses the color gradient. Let's take a look at the matrix. What that does is that it moves around the triangles. If we open this fractal in the triangle editor, you'll see these triangles, and the matrix settings randomize the position of these triangles. We move them around, you can get quite big differences in the fractal. You can enlarge them, you can rotate them, stuff like that. And that is what the matrix does. It will give this result on this fractal. You can see it's the same as moving the triangles around by hand, but it's random. And you can of course decide how much it will randomize it. You can randomize the settings completely like this, and you can use these sliders to decide how big the effect will be. If we have the sliders very low like this, you will have a small effect, and you will have just slight variations on the fractal that you are working on. You can see here that this shape here is changing very little, just a little bit, and you don't see so much change in the other shapes here. So let's try to set these a little higher, and you will get bigger changes as you see here. But still not very much. So let's try and increase them even more. Now you can see bigger differences. And you can try to randomize them again. You see that gave a little bigger differences between the fractals. You can keep on setting these so that you get the result you want. You can choose to have pre-matrix and post-matrix. If you have the post-matrix, you will get bigger results. You have to play a lot with the sliders to get the right amount here. Sometimes if you move the sliders way up when having chosen the post matrix, you will get better results. I have noticed that several times, that if you have pre-matrix you need to low values, and if you have post-matrix you need high values on these sliders. But every fractal is different, so I don't know if I want to make the rule of thumb. You have to just test it. But here you can select which transforms are going to be selected. If I just want to apply this to those two transforms, the others will stay unaffected. So it could be a good thing to open the triangle editor and see what shapes are being done by what transforms. So you can decide that that part of the fractal I want to randomize and get something more interesting, and you can use these checkboxes here to do that. The crazy matrix. I'm not sure I can exactly explain what it does that the matrix doesn't do. But you often get a quicker result using the crazy matrix if you want to just try and change something and see what happens. And you can set the amount of change on randomization using these pots here. Increase these, and you will get more movement in the triangles. And of course, if you randomize the color gradient, lower it to 27, and the camera, you will get even more change when using. Oh, that was pretty. You can give the same fractal very different appearances depending on what color gradient you use. So it can be very effective to randomize several of these settings here. And the camera, I can show you that too. You can randomize the pitch, the yaw, the roll, the perspective, depth of field, the height. I never touch the height, just leave that set. But if I want to have something more interesting still, I can check fixed yaw, and I can uncheck the perspective and the depth of field. That means that the pitch, the perspective, and the depth of field will be randomized. Let's see what that will bring. You can see here that you have, let's see, a fractal where it's very clear. Well, not any one of these, I think. Here, you have one. If we do a quick look on that one, you can see that these shapes a little bit farther in this 3D fractal, they are blurred. They are outside the depth of field. Like in a camera, if you take a shot of a flower and you set the focus here, this part will be blurred. And when you use the camera controls here in the preview window, you can set the set position to where in this fractal the blurring will start to occur, and the depth of field sets how much they will be blurred. The mixin, check that. The mixin lets you mix in another variation, and if I want to mix in a linear here, I check the linear. I want them mixed in all of these, or just a few of them. Let's take the two first. And now the linear variation is added into the mix. And you can try different settings. You can, what happens if we add a linear to all the transforms? You get some interesting results here. Oh, I like that one. And that one. Oh yes. Let's stash that one. Now, in the best of worlds, an application never crashes. But just like when you use a word processor, a good rule of thumb is when you have something that you really don't want to lose, save it. And we can save this by just dragging it to the desktop. Now it's saved. I really like that one. That was pretty. Really great. I think we will work a little bit more with that one later. Let's try another variation here. Something a bit more obvious. Let's try two-face. And why not a Udascope 3D? And we want more two-face than Udascope, so we lower the weight of that one. And this slider can set the master mix-in amplitude, how much you mix in of this. And here you can see we get another result. This colored ball here indicates that Fractal Architect didn't quite manage to calculate those numbers that we just throw at it. It went out of range somewhere in the equation. If we lower this one, will those dreaded balls go away? Apparently they will. It's like when you crank up the volume too much, you get distortion. You can look at those round clouds of balls there as some kind of fractal distortion. And the X-form weights. The X-form weights, let's look at what that is. These are the list of transforms. X-form and transform, it's the same. And these are the weights. If I look at this, yes, that is, it is. And if I change the weight of that, let's make it very much, 20. And 6 thumbnails. You can see it gets more predominant in the fractal. And other stuff gets less dominating. So that's the weights, the X-form weights. Another setting here is the variation weights, and that's these. Every one of these transformations, or these transforms, sorry, contains these variations. You can see that they are a little different. And these weights, that is randomized by the variation weights here. And the variation parameters, you found those in the random generation settings here in the Make New window. Every fractal variation that has a little plus after its name got parameters that can be set. And you set the parameter ranges here. And that's the variation parameters here. If we randomize the X-form weights, the weights of the transforms, you will get a little different result from these fractals. Not too drastic. If you randomize the variation weights, you will get a bigger change, a little bit more drastic. You can see the shapes change more when you have the variation weights randomized. And if you randomize the variation parameters, you also get pretty big changes in the different shapes in the fractal. So if you check all of these and the camera and try the matrix too, you will get very different results from what you had to start with. So you can decide how much randomization change do you want. You can have very little change, and you can pinpoint a specific shape to change just that shape, just this much, and you can go wild and just randomize everything. The final X form, that's the same as you find here in the randomization settings, the final X form, and you can add a final X form. And we talked about when we looked at these randomization settings that the normal transforms get shaped by the linked transforms, and these two, the result of these two, get shaped by the final X form. It's the last shaper of the fractal. And if I choose here to add a final X form, let's go back to what we had so we can see the difference. We can keep on randomizing the color gradient. And we add a final X form. We set that here. And let's use a Julescope 3D. No, a Julescope 2D. And it will look like this. Now the Julescope variation shape this fractal here, and you can see the results are very big and a lot of change. And I can show you a very good variation to use as a final transform. It's the two-phase. Where is two-phase? It's gone to fight Batman. Let's look at that one. What two-phase does is that it separates the fractal into two sides. Thereof the name two phases. Two-phase. And if you don't, let's randomize the camera, or rather, let's take out all the 3D and just have 2D. That will make it clearer. See? Two distinct sides of the fractal. That's two-phase. Two-phase won't look as good if you have it as a normal transform. It will look better if you have it as a link transform. And on a 2D fractal as a final transform, it looks just great. Like this. And of course you can have several final X forms. We could use a cardioid too and set the weight between them and get the cardioid shape here too. You get the both two-phase, two distinct sides, and the cardioid flower shape here. So you can have a lot of fun with final X forms. The chaos. Oh, don't ask me to explain the chaos. Ask Steven. He tried to explain it to me and I didn't quite get it. I'm an artist, not a mathematician. But the artistic result of using chaos is, if we take out the color gradient, different part of the shapes here in the fractals get more pronounced or less pronounced. Could get darker here, you see in the background. It's not such big difference. The symmetry, of course, is how many times the fractal form is repeated. And you see the difference here. It speaks for itself, and you can set the symmetry here. -6 I have set here. If we change that to -12 and +12, you get a slightly different result. And let's look at what we get if we change the color gradient and we change the settings of the camera again to pitch, perspective, and depth of field. You can see that I can generate rather interesting fractals too. The mastering is the setting of the gamma threshold, the vibrancy, the brightness. And you can change all that and randomize it with these sliders. Oh, stop. Let's uncheck color gradient. Sometimes it doesn't stop when you click cancel because it's already done. It has just not rendered them on screen yet. Here you can see variations of the mastering parameters. Not very big change. A more effective way to do that is to open the triangle editor and go to flame parameters, and here you can set the brightness. You can do that after the render too, but you can just as well do it before the render. If we change this to 2, you will see this fractal getting darker, yes, and it could be it's needed. Let's say that it's needed. It's not just an option, it's really needed to get really good fractals to play with these settings, because you don't want blown out highlights. If you get blown out highlights, the fractal won't look as good. Just think of it as a photo. If you have a photo and you have the wrong settings for the aperture and the shutter, you will get blown out highlights. The gamma, you can change that, and it's not as a gamma in a picture that you have a photo you have on the computer, and you change the gamma and it's the mid-tones that changes. When you change the gamma here, I guess it's still mid-tones, but you can see here in the fringes of the shapes here, they get a bit cracked up and just doesn't look as solid. And if you change the gamma, let's change that to 3, you will see that these shapes here, yes, they get smaller because all these points out here that started to crack up, they are filtered out. So that is what the gamma does. And if you have a fractal and you want it more defined, it's a bit unclear and you want it more defined, try lowering the gamma. The add transform lets you add a transform to this mix. Remember you had the transforms here, and add transform simply adds another transform, like clicking the plus here, or duplicate, or random. It doesn't become a linked transform, just an ordinary transform. And I think it's always a linear that gets added. Let's click it several times and see what happens. And let's take this one and open it up in the triangle editor, and you can see you have several more transforms here that are linear. So that was the variant editor, I hope this has made it a little bit more clear. Until next time, keep spinning those virtual dice, and I will be back with more in-depth tutorials. Thank you.